You swore this one would be different. New name, new face, a laugh that made you feel something you hadn't felt in years. You told your friends this one felt different from day one. Some part of you almost believed it. For a while it was different. Then the silences started arriving on schedule. Then you found yourself in the same argument, using the same words, about the same thing you promised yourself you'd never fight about again. The details change. The shape never does. You start to wonder if you're just bad at this. If you keep picking wrong over and over like some private curse only you are under. 3 relationships in and the faces are unrecognizable, but the ending arrives right on schedule, stitched from the exact same fabric every time. But the real answer is far stranger. Your brain isn't choosing partners at random. It isn't choosing badly on purpose either. It's running a pattern. One written so early in your life that you never got a vote on it, and buried so deep in your nervous system that you don't experience it as a pattern at all. You experience it as chemistry, as this just feels right, as love at first sight. Here's the part that sounds impossible. That instant feeling of rightness might be the single most predictable thing about you. In the years after the Second World War, a British psychiatrist named John Bowlby was asked to study something painfully practical. What happens to the mental health of children who grow up in orphanages and hospitals, separated from a consistent caregiver? What he found troubled him enough to spend the rest of his career chasing a bigger question. Why do young children separated from a caregiver, even for a few minutes, react with such specific, overwhelming distress? Bowlby's answer became one of the most influential ideas in modern psychology. He called it attachment theory. Humans, he argued, are born with a biological drive to bond with a caregiver. The quality of that early bond doesn't just shape your childhood. It builds an internal template, a working blueprint for what closeness is supposed to feel like, what to expect from the people who are supposed to love you, and how much of yourself is safe to show them. You don't remember building this blueprint. You were too young to store it as a memory. But you carry it anyway, the same way you carry a native language you can't recall learning. Bowlby had the theory. He needed the proof. That proof came from a developmental psychologist named Mary Ainsworth, in one of the more quietly devastating experiments in the history of the field. It was called the strange situation. A toddler and their mother would enter a room full of toys. A stranger would walk in. The mother would step out for a few minutes, then come back. Ainsworth wasn't really studying what happened when the mother left. She was studying what happened when the mother returned. Some toddlers ran to their mother, cried for a moment, and then settled quickly, comforted enough to go back to playing. Ainsworth called this secure attachment. Other toddlers barely reacted at all, avoiding contact with the returning mother, as if some part of them had already learned that needing someone rarely got them anywhere. She called this avoidant attachment. And some toddlers were inconsolable, clinging to the mother one moment, angrily pushing her away the next, as if comfort and punishment had become tangled into a single experience. She called this anxious attachment. 3 patterns, formed before most of these children could speak in full sentences. These categories weren't a one-time finding either. They've been replicated across dozens of studies in different cultures in the decades since, which is part of why they're still taught in psychology classrooms today. Which one sounds familiar? Decades later, 2 other researchers found these same 3 patterns in a place nobody had thought to look. Their names were Hazan and Phillip, and in 1987, they asked a question that quietly rewired how psychologists understood adult love. Their method was almost charmingly simple. They printed a short questionnaire in a local newspaper, essentially a love quiz, asking readers to describe both their most important relationship and their childhood family life on the same page. What if romantic relationships aren't a separate system from childhood attachment at all? What if they're the exact same system, just running with a different person, standing in the spot a caregiver used to stand? Hazan and Shaver asked adults to describe both their romantic relationships and their early family life. The results mapped onto Ainsworth's three categories almost perfectly. Adults who described warm, dependable childhoods tended to describe love as comfortable, something they could trust without constant maintenance. Adults who described more inconsistent, unpredictable caregiving described a familiar ache in their adult relationships too. Craving closeness, fearing abandonment, refreshing a phone screen and reading an unanswered message as evidence that something has already gone wrong. Adults who described more distant, undemonstrative caregiving described discomfort with too much closeness, a pull toward independence that from the outside could look a lot like a wall. The room had changed, the person standing in it had changed, the pattern hadn't. So why would your nervous system keep choosing something that hurts it? This is the part that sounds backwards until you understand what your brain is actually built to optimize for. It was never built to find you happiness. It was built to find you predictability, because predictability, to a nervous system, has always meant survival. A partner who is warm, steady, and easy to read can feel, to a nervous system trained on a chaotic or distant early template, unfamiliar, almost suspicious, in a way you can't quite name. Meanwhile, a partner who runs hot and cold, who makes you wait, who pulls back right when you get close, can register as coming home. Not because any of that is good for you, because it's known. Think of it as a kind of calculation your nervous system runs without asking your permission. A brain that can correctly predict what happens next, even when what happens next is unpleasant, has an advantage over a brain that's constantly caught off guard. Predictable disappointment can end up ranking as safer than unpredictable kindness. A psychologist named Robert Zayonk spent years studying something called the mere exposure effect. His finding was simple and a little unsettling. People rate things as more likable simply because they've encountered them before, with no other reason required at all. Repetition on its own manufactures a feeling of warmth. Your brain doesn't only apply this rule to songs stuck in your head or faces you recognize on the street. It applies the same rule to entire emotional dynamics. If tension and inconsistency are what you were exposed to first, calm doesn't always register as safety. Sometimes it registers as boring. Occasionally it registers as wrong. Does that sound like affection? Or does it just sound like familiarity wearing affection's clothes? That's the twist hiding underneath the twist. You are not choosing the same type of partner because some part of you enjoys being hurt. You are choosing the same nervous system weather because your body learned, long before you had language for any of it, that this specific mix of tension and relief is simply what closeness is supposed to feel like. Long before any of this could be measured in a lab, Sigmund Freud gave a version of this pattern an unsettling name: repetition compulsion. His observation was that people don't only remember painful relational patterns, they recreate them again and again, often with entirely different people wearing the same emotional costume, as though some part of the mind keeps replaying a problem it couldn't solve the first time, hoping this attempt finally lands differently. Freud didn't have Bowlby's theory or Ainsworth's data. But from the opposite end of the century, he was describing the same loop. Later clinicians even gave this pattern a name for when it showed up inside their own offices: transference, the way an old relational blueprint gets projected onto a brand new relationship, sometimes within the first few sessions. Notice how this shows up now. In a life that looks nothing like a nursery or a room full of toys and a departing mother, it's the profile you scroll past because the calm, steady bio feels somehow flat. Nothing to solve, nothing to chase. It's the one you linger on because their inconsistency reads as mystery instead of what it actually is. It's the friend who finally says, carefully, this is basically the same person as your ex, just with a different job and a different city. It's the way one specific tone of voice from a partner can spike your heart rate exactly the way a moment from your childhood used to, decades removed, and somehow identical down to the sensation in your chest. It's checking a new partner's social media within the first week, the same way you once learned to check a caregiver's mood before deciding whether it was safe to ask for something. It's the friends in your group chat who've quietly started using the same nickname for every partner you bring around, because from the outside, the pattern is obvious in a way it never quite is from the inside. It's the quiet, early warning on the first or second date, easy to wave off as nerves, that turned out, in hindsight, to have been your nervous system recognizing the pattern before your conscious mind caught up. Why does a total stranger's silence feel like a 5-alarm fire? Your body isn't confused in these moments. Your body is being extremely consistent. It's applying the oldest lesson it was ever taught, in a context that only looks brand new from the outside. This is also why "just find someone nicer" has never really worked as advice, no matter how many times a friend has offered it over coffee. Nice, to a nervous system trained on unpredictability, doesn't automatically read as relief. Sometimes it reads as absence. As if the tension that used to signal this relationship matters has gone quiet, and quiet gets mistaken for the lack of a connection instead of what it actually is. The unfamiliar feeling of safety. None of this means the pattern is fixed forever. Researchers who followed Ainsworth's original framework over the following decades found something worth holding on to. Attachment patterns can shift, particularly through relationships, through consistent new experiences, through anything that gives a nervous system enough repeated evidence that a different kind of closeness is possible, and more importantly, survivable. The template was learned. What was learned can be slowly updated, not through a single insight at midnight after a breakup. Through repetition, the same patient mechanism that built the template in the first place, which means a moment like this one, hearing the pattern named out loud for the first time, counts as a small piece of that repeated evidence. Not a fix, just one data point your nervous system didn't have before. Awareness alone doesn't rewrite a blueprint built over years, but it does mean the next time the old pattern starts to speak, some quieter part of you might finally recognize the voice. So the next time you meet someone new and feel that instant, electric certainty that this one is different, it might be worth asking a quieter question underneath the excitement. Is this person actually different? Or does this simply feel like the only shape love has ever taken for you, specifically, for as long as you can remember? You swore this one would be different. Maybe it will be. But only once you can finally see the blueprint you've been quietly following all along.